The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everyone, it is Mark Kelly here and you're listening to the ServiceNow podcast. We're very, very happy to welcome Philip Taphouse to the podcast. Philip is VP of ServiceNow CoE at NTT. Philip, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you've been in this world for quite a bit of time and you've been building up your experience, building up your knowledge and sharing those knowledge for years now. It would be lovely before we kind of go into your current role and work that you did to maybe take a step back and talk through your career and the different milestones that you've probably had along the way. Just tell us a little bit about you as a person.
So I've been working in the ServiceNow ecosystem for 17 years, pretty much since it was a thing. I think, we were the third implementation or so in the UK when I picked it up at Millen Science and Education. And it didn't even actually have like a fancy name. So, we went into Aspen release and now we're at Xanadu and we've been around the world many times. It was just called ServiceNow. So there was no platform release. And it was the simplest times because you paid one cost per user and you got access to everything in the system, which is great, not compared to the thousands of SKUs they've got now. So that was really where it all started. I fell into it by accident. I've been in operations my whole career. I'd worked with some really good media enterprises, and I'd been in printing press and newspapers, and I'd been in automotive and doing kind of similar based products, but never revolved around a platform. And then when Macmillan came along, I was asked to implement ServiceNow in the UK and in the US, based out of London and New York. And it was really kind of the first iteration of what became the powerhouse of the platform now. So we got that up and running, and I kind of saw a bit of potential for it, and went. That was a short-term kind of contract. We got the platform up and running for a very basic incident, problem, change, and a little portal that was up. And the portals back in the day were awful, but it was what it was, and that was really successful. And we got some good measurement metrics of some ROI for the client. And then I kind of moved on, walked away from ServiceNow just for about a year, and it obviously continued to advance during that time. And I ended up at Hogarth, where I ran operations there, and we were looking for a new kind of ticketing tool, which I hate putting ServiceNow in that box, but that's what it was at the time, to replace Jira, because it wasn't doing it for our customers, and we turned to ServiceNow. And then it was really at that point I started to see the power of what the platform could become and the direction it was going in as being that workflow engine, which I think was Fred Luddy's initial kind of vision for what the platform would be, but it wasn't at that point when we first implemented. But this time around it was very different. There was some real automations that you could do, a lot of custom scripting back in the days of Jelly, but it had that zip of, oh, this could be exciting. And then I kind of went from there. I went contracting again. I ended up at the Ministry of Justice, where we were running the common criminal platform, which was about the digitization from the point you get arrested to the point you either go to jail or get released. And they were putting platforms in to kind of digitize that, because a lot of it was paper-based at that time. And it was a ServiceNow program, again, to support the running of those platforms and so forth. And that really took us on an accelerated journey, because this was, I think, the first time government really got deeply involved in cloud. Like, a lot of this stuff was being written on AWS. We had to have an understanding what was there. So we were implementing cloud discovery for like one of the first times on that scale, because the platform was just lightning developments at that point. And we managed to get it up and running for the first time and populating a CMDB. We had some kind of semblance of what we call CSDM now, what that was like or what it could be in the past, and did some really great things. We unified 3 government departments onto a single instance. We had automations running through the portal and through the catalog. We had that discovery running. Like I said, we were running lots of automations through incident and automatic kind of alert correlation, the first real element of that coming into a platform. And then from there moved on to a short stint at Sony PlayStation, looking to ratify or reconcile, I should say, a number of their platforms. They had like over 100 instances of ServiceNow around the world. So we're looking at a plan how we can shrink that footprint down. And that was just a consulting piece. And then on to Thames Water, which really changed my entire life. Thames Water was the big program where I came up with the idea of ITOM Solution, which was the company I would later go on to found, and was really the first time that we were able to bring all elements of the ITOM platform into realization and actually extrapolate a lot of value from that. So while we weren't specifically AI focused at that point, that was the first time, because AIOps wasn't a thing, it was the first time ITOM worked. So we had service mapping working, we had discovery working locally and in the cloud. We had CSDM variant 1, brand new out the box in the platform and working. And we proved lots and lots of ROI returns for that. We had dynamic integrations with many platforms like Aptio and other licensing stuff into IBM World to really reconcile all of that stuff. And then we had event management and the first semblance of metric ingestion into the platform too. And then I kind of thought there's something here because of just the ROI we achieved for Thames over a 2-year period was in the region of millions. So it was great. We were able to rewrite contracts, get vendors working in a different way, prevent downtimes and outages. And it was really significant. And was lucky enough to do some stuff at Knowledge and at World Forum about that. Then we went on the march with ITOM, and it was just, basically served every bank in the UK, going full AIOps to right through where we are now, running, we're running global programs for automated AIOps and service operation implementations for like IAG Group and National Grid and so forth. And it's fully AI driven at the center. So it's been a bit of a crazy, 17 years. Lots happened, and the platform's changed a lot since the first time I looked at it. And I've found myself specializing in the AIOps service ops world.
There's so much information there and so many different insights that I could go into in a bit more detail. When you had the outcomes from Thames Water, and I'm guessing the confidence came and people started to kind of pull up their sleeves and kind of lean in terms of the outcomes, because obviously the efficiency, the profitability, or the money saved, and then you started introducing it across different banks. Were you finding that you were just getting referral after referral, or were you still having to knock down the door? Or I would have thought you were the welcome guest rather than the annoying pest then from there on in.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was crazy the way it took off. So the first customer we signed in this space after the work at Thames Water was actually Clydesdale Bank, which later became Virgin Money. And Scott McGarvey was the guy that opened the door there. And he had the same vision that I had on where we could potentially take this thing. And we went and we implemented the first version of it. And then it was literally, Aberdeen Standard Life, SJP, they all started to contact us and not fall like dominoes, that's the wrong thing to say, but sign up as customers and participation in this kind of crazy experiment we were doing. And it really, really started to pay off the way we could look at transparency through, single vein transactions, to look at a user journey through mobile banking and work out exactly where things were going wrong. And then the fulfillment, that promise of being able to fix something before it happens, that actually came to fruition. I worked with Scott in a number of different places. I think the standout for me was TSB, where TSB were really in hot water with the regulators. That's a well-known thing. They had a major systems failure. People couldn't get money out of their bank. They couldn't pay bills. They couldn't use their card to get food from the shops. And the regulators came down hard on them. They had nearly $500 million in escrow with the regulators and 2 years to fix this problems, and a divorce with the Bank of Sabadell going on. But it got to the point where we had full AIOps implemented. We were running a managed service for a 24/7 support desk located inside the bank. And over a Black Friday, Cyber Monday window, and not long after we'd gone live, we prevented that application failing like 6-7 times, and we shifted it left. So first line engineers that were on call got notified exactly where the problem was. They got knowledge that was chucked up on the screen for them. They knew what to do. They restarted the service. It didn't go down. And that was like keeping it alive until the seniors arrived in the morning. Then they took action. And that was really the moment that just everything that we've been working for over that, 3-year journey by that point just came to fruition and exploded. It was intense. It was really, really powerful.
It's amazing just to see that impact, because we've all got blind spots about doing things in a certain way, and then sometimes you get used to doing it a certain way, but then when you're actually shown the right way or the optimal way, you're just sitting back thinking, geez, this is absolutely incredible. So tell us then a little bit about the acquisition and then your role and how you kind of graduated in and transitioned in within a large, one of the largest companies now in the world.
Yeah, so the acquisition was twofold. The first acquisition was of ITOM solution into Sapphire as a group, which was led by Horizon Capital. And that was interesting because we grew 30% year one, 35% year two in terms of revenue, and then I think about 20% in terms of staff, because we really dominated or captured the market, signing deals with likes of WPP, just mega deals there, which is great. And then around this time last year, we were acquired as a group then by NTT, specifically NTT Data Business Solutions. NTT is a massive company, a $4 billion turnover, 360,000 people, but multiple entities. And we're specifically NDBS. And that's been interesting. And NDBS, because we came from private equity, who are, foot on your throat 24/7, we've got to make more cash, we've got to grow. Not always in the most healthiest of ways, and quite a bit of burnout for some staff, if not managed properly. NDBS are more in that kind of vein of wanting to grow things in a sustainable and sensible way, so that we can have longevity, we can have real quality through delivery, through the delivery centers, and hire the right people and make the right choices, but also not be afraid to fail and make mistakes in some areas. So it's been a very big shift in kind of culture and getting used to that, from a million miles an hour to maybe a bit more relaxed. But actually the way they're trying to go about it and the way they're trying to position themselves is very, very good. And it is a total kind of mindset set shift for us as an organization, but in the healthiest of possible variants. It's been interesting, but I think interesting in the right way.
Tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing now day to day and how you're helping some of your customers.
Yeah, so now we're in the big enterprise space, and the most notable one I think I can talk openly about, and some of these projects are quite sensitive, so you'll appreciate I can't divulge too much, but that's the work we're doing with IAG and specifically British Airways. We're working very hard in the background, or they're working very hard in the background, I should say, to stabilize their digital transactions and digital portfolio. I don't think it's any secret that they've struggled with that in the last 2-3 years, where, they've had issues with some of their important systems that have prevented you being able to book a flight or to retrieve a booking or sometimes board a plane. I'm not saying anything that's not publicly available. They're doing a lot of work in the background to modernize that. And, I can see what they're doing that I know a lot of people aren't aware of. And when they get where they're going to go, it's going to be phenomenal, and it will change the game, I think, actually, the aviation game. And alongside that, they really recognize that one of their weak points, which sadly is the case with a lot of organizations, is actually how they understand that user journey and how they understand the reactiveness and the performance of components across what are now monolithic applications. And we've gone, just to step back from that a second, we've gone from simple, powerful applications that are running on maybe a mainframe or on a server that queries a database, that's accessed by a web front end, very, very simple in its architecture, even at scale, to things that are running multi microservices, where you can have one transaction, maybe a checkout, calling another transaction, maybe a recommendation, so that that pop up before you go, do you want to buy this stuff too? They're all handled by different call-ups and different microservices. And any transactional degradation across those services can really dynamically impact the entire user journey to the point where they would lose custom. Like, I'm one of the most impatient people in the world. When I'm buying something online, I want that blue t-shirt. And if your site can't process a simple transaction for me, I'll just go find it somewhere else, and I'm probably not coming back to you, right? And I know a lot of people that are like that. You have some brand loyalty for specific things, of course. I promise I'm coming back to the original point. But what happens with these organizations is, if they don't deal with that, there's a lot of revenue that's lost by just non-completion of transactions. So people don't buy the thing they would have bought from you. There's reputational damage. But when you move into a regulatory space, there's also things such as, bad press, because you're a big public-facing company. There are things like customer refunds. If you're delayed at an airport, or you're delayed on a train more than 15 minutes, half an hour, you have to be compensated by the company. You've got the regulators that will come in and say, well, look at the significant upheaval that's happened. People were stuck here, couldn't board a plane, couldn't get on a train. We're going to charge you. And then you've got the operational charge costs of not only your staff, but the fines that come from things like train stations and airports. If for every 15 minutes you're late taking off from an airport, you're charged like £500,000. It's ridiculous. So there are trillions trillions of dollars floating around the world, going backwards and forwards in fines from airports to aviation companies and backwards and forwards. So if you can really capture and understand how these transactions flow through these monolithic applications that are all, cloud hosted and all web front end and microservice based now, and you can understand exactly how they're flowing and when a degradation will impact an important service which is regulated or customer facing, then you can significantly increase your value as a company, you can increase your revenue as a company, and you can increase your reliability for customers. And that's directly shown to impact your EBITDA number. A great example of this was Trainline.com. And Trainline.com spent a year and a half where the CTO is talking about how they shave 0.7 milliseconds off the page load time, which equated to £1 million extra revenue per year, which equated to like 100,000 drop through to EBITDA. That's insane, from 0.7 milliseconds. And that's just improving the speed. Imagine if you improved the speed, the experience, and the reliability by implementing service ops. Then how many more millions in revenue and what's your drop through for EBITDA? So there, the business case becomes like a no-brainer for a CTO, CEO, CFO, right? Because they know they're going to get back from it.
For me, what I loved about yourself was the business acumen to understand that user journey and then the outcome for the key decision makers. Because sometimes you're talking techie to a tech audience, but the reality today, the CFO and the CEO are going to make these decisions, and unless you're speaking their love language, they're not really going to kind of kick it off. And there's certain modules that are going to do really, really well with the finance officer who's going to sign them off. But everything else, you really need to start to win their different minds. Talk me through Gen AI and AIOps, because I attended my first Snug in Ireland last week in Dublin, and it was fantastic. And they were talking about how ServiceNow was primed for AI because of the acquisitions they've been making over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, if not further afield. And they had a strong foundation and mindset to then take off when it really kind of came true. What is that in your mind, minus the hype versus reality? And is there any interesting use cases that you're actually seeing?
So I think actually that hype versus reality versus expectation is very important at the outset, right? It's like the Instagram post where you've got, what I expected versus reality. And you see like the expectation's always amazing and the reality is like a sad sandwich or something. And I think the definition of AIOps is also really important. I think of AIOps as putting AI in the middle of operations, right? AIOps itself is a combination of many different toolkits that give you an outcome. I term that service operations, which is a framework that I'm working on, which we're actually publishing, and we publicly available in the new year. But AIOps and AI in operations is about running advanced K-clustering algorithms, as an example, to take metric, event, alert, incident, change data points on a singular platform to be able to make them humanly readable and make sense of them. So what do I mean by that? I'm lucky enough that I get to go around and see many, many customer sites. I go into operation centers, into the NOC. I've been to some top secret ones in bunkers, which will just blow your mind. But they all have one thing in common. They rely on human beings who are ever more increasingly unreliable, staring at screens that have hundreds of red and amber and blue lines across them indicating warnings, events, failures, and notifications, right? And they basically have to try and keep up with the traffic and spot where something is an issue. And I often ask the question, because you walk in, you see these massive 70-inch TV screens, 3 or 4 of them, and they've all got these lines on there. They're hundreds of lines. Like, well, 10% of those are red. How do I... Shouldn't someone be fixing that? Does that mean that you've got systems down? And the answer is like, oh no, we're always like that. It's fine. So this then becomes like event or noise fatigue. You can't actually see the wood for the trees, right? You can't always see the tree for the wood, whichever way around that is. You just get so lost and conflated in noise, and with the amount of noise since the digital revolution, digital transformation equals disruption, because the amount of volume of noise, incidents, metric basis data points, that's 100x. So how are you supposed to have human beings that are really unreliable? Maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they're a bit tired, maybe they're a bit hungover, maybe they don't know what they're looking for. How can you have them actually spot something that is important for your business? It's impossible. Near on impossible unless you have an army of people doing it, which is really inefficient. So driving algorithms, K-clustering algorithms, which is the thing that changed the game for AIOps, into the middle of an intelligent workflow platform such as ServiceNow, and Big Panda does this really well, as does Dynatrace and AtDynamics. They've all got their own kind of versions of this. They do it really well. It allows you to take all those points and group them together so you can give people context. And context is what the name of the game is all about. Is to be able to say to you, we've seen these 10 things happen. And that could be a couple of entries from a log line. That could be some metric points and normally showing a removal from normal bounds of deviation. That becomes for me some events from maybe a front-end API or maybe from a database query. And we understand they all fit to the same things. We've got CSDM and business modeling, and we've got intelligence around it to say, we think there's a problem. Here's all the information, and this is the thing that will be impacted if you don't do something about it. And that thing could be an application, a service, an offering, or a product, right? And that's the so what moment. Why do we care? Why should I do something about this? Because if you don't, it will break. And if it breaks, you've lost your checkout service, which means people can't buy things from you. And then you're in trouble and people get on a Twitter storm and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think the definition of driving AI into operations is really important, because there is so many different flavors of AI. You hear about Gen AI and Open AI, really kind of, how many times can you say AI in one sentence? But hear about generative AI and Gemini and Open AI and those kind of people have really exploded that. There's been a lot of excitement. Some of it founded, some of it just a massive hype bubble about where agents are realistic right now versus where they will be. But then you've got all the other stuff, which is like image AI, music AI, all that kind of stuff, right? You need to forget about all that stuff in our world. Generative AI in the Now platform is actually surprisingly good, considering how immature it is. We've got customers where we're running live pilots right now with the K-clustering stuff that I spoke about. That's up and running. And then we've got the Gen AI capabilities from ServiceNow's on-platform LLM, using Now Assist to actually create real-time humanized summaries of what's happening. Because all that stuff I spoke about, K-clustering, still requires a human that has good experience and understands what that means. Now with the generative AI stuff linked into a knowledge base, and we've got like some fast deploy packages, we've got some IP around specific error codes and so forth, plus allowing it access to the internet in some instances to do a search, can take a 505 error or a 400 error and say, this application is showing a 400 error. We've noted that there are 4 events that have come in and some metrics that indicate that your XYZ transaction is not performing as it should. This is what we suggest you should do. And they actually really humanize it. That's the first wave of it actually becoming helpful in our world, rather than, just writing a funny story or a poem or telling me a joke. The next level of that is, we recommend you take this action, click here to execute, where it will be what I call human-led agentic capability, where the recommended action, if we simplify it down, is to restart service, or stop and start server, or kill a cloud server and spin up a new one, where the human still has to verify that and click it. And once we get to the point where we've done it maybe 50, 60, 100 times, and we know that it's working, you can start to publish an automated catalog where the system can say, I'm seeing this, I've taken this action. Human, you know about it. And then that's a real paradigm shift as to where we'll go with this technology. But the foundations, specifically in the ServiceNow platform, are really there to take us into that direction.
And I really like the way you're actually saying, blinkers on, let's forget about the images, the music generation, and all these different other fancy toys that are going to get our attention, particularly on the world of LinkedIn. Stick to the core around maybe these 2 or 3 use cases, which are very, very solid. And as you rightly said, it is surprisingly very, very good. Where actually, when you try out, yesterday I used ChatGPT I just asked it to count the words in my blog post, and I used the O1 model. And it gave me 4 pages of these lines and paragraphs where it was manually trying to count it. I was just like going, this is supposed to be their latest tool, and it can't answer that simple question. Or today, if I do it, it will. And it's that inconsistency in terms of what it's trying to use. And for people doing poetry or blog posts or whatever, that's going to be absolutely fine. But having that within a kind of an enterprise level environment is something that you really, really need to kind of get your understanding around. What advice would you offer to people coming into this new world of ServiceNow? We've obviously got the Rise Up program, we've got the ecosystem, it's moving incredibly fast. Would you say to niche down? Would you say to try to go broad? What advice would you offer?
So yeah, I mean, listen, I I have always been the advocate of become a specialist in something. You know, because if you become an absolute expert in an area, that just pays dividends. And that's what we did with that vision of ITOM solution. The clue is in the name, right? For an organization, that's very hard to achieve, for a partner to achieve that, because the market segment is shrunk. For an individual, I think that is the absolute way to go. If you enjoy doing ITSM, go and be the absolute domain expert in implementing ITSM within ServiceNow. If you enjoy ITOM, go and become the domain expert. You should be looking to achieve CPA level, you know, that certified principal architect level. Nothing else should satisfy you unless you want to just become the absolute, you know, most senior upon senior developer that any company will treasure and prize, because you will always have work. And I think people are willing to pay more in a contractor market for a domain expert because of the value you can bring. And also you have an opportunity to make a material difference in a net positive way to any project you work on. And who doesn't like to be the guy, right? Or the girl where everyone goes for their questions and you have that drumbeat of impact. So I would always say to an individual, pick something that you're very passionate about and focus in on becoming a domain expert in that area. For me, that was AIOps and ITOM, you know, and I will sit here literally all day, every day, and I do talk about it, edge cases, use cases, real world things where we've impacted it, where it can actually change your world, to dynamically try and take our customers in the right direction and stop them going off down here. And you can only do that when you've had the projects that go wrong. I failed spectacularly on numbers of projects, right? And I've got all the war wounds, but that makes you more experienced to then be able to take it forward and really do the right thing for your next customer or your next project, or not to make those mistakes. So I would always say specialize where you can and just be really passionate about what it is that you're doing.
Philip Taphouse, thank you very much for sharing your insights today on the Alldus ServiceNow podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.